in this episode, we are going to be expanding upon the previous episode where I showed you how to draw a basic room that we can see down here, how to manipulate some of the features of that room, the wall thickness, rotation of floor and wall textures. Now we're going to take it one step further and show how we can then build upon this using the Doors and Windows tool. On the right hand side, underneath the Tokens tool, there is the Door and Windows tool. On selecting the Door and Windows tool, it'll default to this section over here, from which we can choose our windows and doors. So it will default to a single window general type. We can change that based on what we feel the map is warranting by selecting the texture here, much like we would with selecting our walls and floor textures. And what it will do is the system will propagate all the different types of windows that you have access to as part of your assets and textures pack. You have single windows, double windows, glass, bars, a whole bunch of different stuff that we can use. We're going to stick with the single window for today. Upon selecting it, the texture, or in this case the asset, will appear in the box with a description of what type of asset or texture it is. Underneath, we have the alignment, and with that tool we can choose whether or not this object will snap to grid or not snap to grid, allowing us to place it a little less precise but more exactly where we would like it on the map. What's going to happen is a highlight of that asset is now going to appear in any location that the system will allow it to be placed upon. In this case, it is only for walls, so anything that you have designated in DungeonFog using the Draw Rooms tool as a wall, you can then put these kinds of assets on it. So with the snap to grid taken off, I can place it essentially anywhere on these lines that I see fit. If I selected the snap to grid tool, I can now only place the object in between the points, in between two grid spaces, anywhere along my wall that I have generated. Underneath, we have several behavior tools. We'll go through these one by one. They're fairly self-explanatory, but I'll show you how they kind of interact. So cut out into the wall will mean that whenever I place an object down, it will then actually dig into the created wall and create a sort of mini passageway. Now that we have something, actually, we'll place a couple here just so you can see how they're actually cutting into the wall. This will allow us to actually build out a little bit of how this map is going to look as well. So we can actually set up a couple of windows in the back here, maybe a couple along the side here. We're going to highlight one of these particular windows. We can look at the behavior. So if I cut it in and out of the wall, suddenly now it's just sitting inside the wall, but not necessarily inside the wall in the sense of it's actually a part of the building. It's kind of like sitting on top of the building. The mirror horizontal and mirror vertically takes the asset as it appears in the asset pack and will then flip it based on its orientation on the wall that you're placing on. We'll see this better when we actually put down a door. We'll delve into that a little bit more, but you can change the horizontal and verticality of the object that you've placed. If something needs a key, the system will highlight a red dot. If it is concealed, it will create a red box around that object, but will actually show it a little bit less opaque. It actually sort of sets it into the wall that you're building and masks it a little. If something is trapped, that whole object will then be covered in a red finish, indicating to at least the GM in this case that the object, window, or door that the player is engaging with will set off some kind of a trap. Not too much that we can work with right now just because we haven't thought that far ahead with what we're planning on doing with this map in terms of anything being concealed, booby-trapped, or otherwise. But for more advanced map making, especially as a reminder for you GMs out there, these kind of behavioral tools that you can use in the windows and doors, and later on when we get there into the assets, will allow you to indicate whether something's locked, whether something's trapped, or whether something's hidden. And that can all be done through the behavior tool inside either the asset or the door and window tool proper. When we're looking for a asset that we want to work with, and it's defaulted to, let's say, a general asset pack like this, What this means is that it is taking anything that is generic for DungeonFog without looking at anything that is flavored to a specific texture pack or asset pack. If we wanted to refine that search a little bit more, up at the top, indicating where it says general up here, we can actually click this back button. And by clicking that back button, it will now allow us to look through any and all asset packs that DungeonFog has preloaded into it that you have access to that will allow you to get the types of doors and windows that you're looking for. So we can have doors and windows, let's say, a little bit more generic. We can back it out and let's say maybe we want to go with something a little bit more fantasy based. Well, then here we go. Here's a whole bunch of doors and windows that we can now manipulate. We click on our object, it's now gonna appear in this texture or asset box right beside with a little description of what it is, what pack we found it from, and some of the tags that you can look through to find your objects a little bit easier. Once we have selected our asset, we can then, as we did with the windows, find out where we want to place it. And let's make sure that snap to grid is off. That way I can place it exactly where I want. Essentially what the blocks light behavioral switch will do is make it so that any light source that is inside or outside of that particular asset will not allow light to pass through it. However, it is important to note that if you want light to bleed out of your doors or windows, if you're trying to make something a little bit more ominous, or if you just want, bright lights to barf out into your surrounding area, the blocks light feature will allow light to pass through it if it is not selected. If it is selected, then no light generating sources inside or outside of your building will pass through here. With the mirroring verticality and horizontal orientations, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more here so we can see what's going on. There we go. So there's our door right there. You can see that the orientation of the door handle is actually to the inside of the building, and I don't necessarily like that. So because this door handle is facing on the inside, I actually want to just mirror it horizontally. Oh, and like that, it then takes this asset up here and flips it, meaning that now it was facing inside, now it's facing outside. If I were to invert its verticality, it would take the door knob on the top of the asset and flip it to the bottom, like so. And I think I kind of want that, so we'll leave it as such, the way that it is now oriented. Going back into our rooms tool for just a minute, there were two extra tools that I wanted to focus on at this time. So what the Dopper tool allows you to do is it allows you to essentially copy a configuration based on the texture packs that you've selected and allow you to utilize them for a new object that you're building or a new room that you're laying out. So if I were to select the Dopper tool here and click on that, it now has changed what I've highlighted into what I've selected the Dopper tool to be. So again, I clicked the Dopper tool and I clicked on the floor here. It grabbed that floor texture and then applied it to the brick wall that we once had. I don't like that because it's all part of the same asset, so I'm just gonna revert that. Control Z to just take it back a step or undo. The last thing I want to show you within the Draw Rooms section is changing your wall types. Right now, we have basically all the walls selected. Inside the Draw Rooms tool, there is the wall type feature that allows you to alter the appearance of the walls that you are about to build or anything that you have already built. So inside this little drop-down menu, we have normal. Normal walls, whatever you'd find on a typical building. If something is below ground, suddenly now the exterior wall is no longer visible. All we have is the interior wall, suggesting that there is a foundation or level above it. If we wanted to change to a cave type asset, you can see that now the interior of the wall has become rigid and jagged. And with everything that we have done so far with all the alterations that we've made, each one of these you can change the sometimes inner thickness or outer thickness depending on what type of wall you're trying to create and how you want it to look. Classic black and white. If you're a fan of the SVG style or your classic grid You know, when you break out your pad of paper and your grid paper and you're drawing maps on the fly like that, as so many of us have probably done, you can revert everything back to that black and white scale. And then the advanced. Now what the advanced allows you to do is essentially start playing around in more specific detail with the color and color properties and styles of the wall that you're creating. I want to touch on color properties in a later video when we're talking about the brush tool, because then we're going to get a better sense of how powerful the brush tool and the color property features are in that time. So we're going to revert back to normal. So we have our original brick with the wood flooring all set to go. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, please make sure to hit that sub button below. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload new videos. If you're not following me over on my Twitch page, you can head over to twitch.tv/EsquireVT and check out my live streams. You can also follow any of my socials in the description down below.